Greetings, this is Thomas Caldwell with the Aurelian Column. It is Thursday, August 3rd, 2023, and this is a special report for paying and non-paying subscribers and anyone else who you want to pass it on to. This is about a man named Gonzalo Lira. For those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's an independent journalist, political commentator based in Ukraine. He has been there since 2016, married to one of the nationals. He is a United States citizen and has been in prison for a couple of months, recently got out and tried to leave the country, tried to depart, tried to escape. Apparently that didn't work. He tried to get into Hungary on the 31st of July, and it seems, in fact, it's been just reported that he was recaptured, rearrested. And according to his report, he has been tortured. He's been extorted for upwards of $100,000 and is probably going to be sent off to 5 or 7 years in a labor camp for a YouTube video where he talks about the reality behind the Ukraine-Russian war. And a lot of people are wanting to help this man. Calling awareness to his situation is good, but I'm here to give some solid advice based on my own experience and what actually could work to help him, not only save his life, but possibly get him out of the country. First off, what not to do, and I'm going to give you some information. First, my background is I have worked as a lobbyist before many years ago in the 20th century when things were far more civilized. I've also lived overseas for nearly 30 years of my life. A couple days ago, I did put out on the notes on Substack to contact the White House, and here's a phone number. Now, that's going to have a little effect. If people call up and say, do what you can to help Gonzalo Lira, but we all know about the Biden administration and how in cahoots they are with Ukraine. But that won't be as effective as something else. And that is contacting your U.S. Senator. Now, before we go into that, something you should not do, and do not call the U.S. State Department directly, and especially do not contact something called American Citizen Services. The State Department, in spite of what people may think, is, like most parts of the federal government, run by career civil servants. I'm not talking deep state. I'm talking about career civil servants, and the Foreign Service of the United States has some pretty amazing people in it. I've known over the years people who work for American Citizen Services. I've had to utilize them a few times while I was overseas and here in the United States. They have a very tough job of taking care of thousands and thousands of Americans that run into trouble while traveling outside this country or living overseas. And they have their hands full, let's put it that way. If you contact them and start asking them to help Gonzalo Lira, unless you're a blood relative or a very, very, very close friend or business associate, it's just going to be wasting their time and wasting yours. You have to play this smart, and we have to play this by the system. So forget contacting the State Department. You have to contact their bosses. What you're going to need to do is contact your state senator, or senators, two people. You have to go to a website called Senate, which is senate.gov, senate.gov. And there you'll have a website, and it's pretty straightforward. It's everything involving the United States Senate. Go to the section about senators, type in your state, and there's 2 names that are going to pop up and 2 pictures. And there's a phone number underneath each, and that's the number you call. Now, why is this important? Well, first off, why not contact your congressman? Okay, well, you can do that as well, but senators have an awful lot more power. First off, remember the purpose of the secretaries of various government branches are there to report to the Senate. In fact, the whole system was set up as a way of freeing up George Washington's time. Long story there. But if you ever wonder why members of the cabinet have to be approved by the Senate and why you always see members of the cabinet testifying in front of the Senate, it's because they work very closely together. That's also the Senate has a say in foreign affairs. Senators are the ones that ratify foreign treaties. these are the people you want to contact for this sort of thing. The other thing is, and this is not generally known to most Americans, senators are there to cut through the bureaucracy and the red tape for their constituents. And this might sound like science fiction these days, given how popular the U.S. government is with some of us, but it's actually quite true. It's one of the main things they do. They don't just sit around and talk. They actually have staff members that do this. If you have trouble with Social Security, if you have trouble with your veterans benefits, if you have trouble with anything, you contact your senator's office, and they can help you, usually. Let me give you an example. Some of you may remember the late Senator Edward Kennedy, the last of the Kennedy brothers to pass away. I believe it was in 2009 or 2010. And although he had a very liberal political agenda, and although he had quite a few shortcomings, personality and character, he knew his job. And if you were a citizen of Massachusetts and you had an issue and you called his office, his office had a reputation of pulling out every stop they could to help you. The guy really shone it after 9/11. If you were from Massachusetts and a member of your family was killed in the terrorist attacks or injured, or somehow you were affected, boy, did his office took good care of you. He was almost like a mafioso boss when it came to protecting his people. And that sounds kind of funny, but that's how senators are supposed to operate. That being said, the Senate has an awful lot of power also. Senators have a lot of power because they're in office for so long. They live in Washington for a long time. They're elected to 6-year terms. Most of them get reelected. They're there for 12 years, longer than any president would be. And it's not uncommon for them to be elected for another term. So they're there for decades. That's your background in civics, but here's how you're going to do it. You're going to go to senate.gov, and you're going to find the phone numbers for your two senators. It helps if you do a bit of research or you know who they are and find out what committees they're on. I called my senators today, and one of my senators is on foreign relations, which was great. You're going to call the number, and usually you'll get a menu of leaving a voicemail, which you can do, although I would not recommend that. I would recommend talking to one of the staffers for a problem. And when you call up, don't be silly and certainly don't be threatening. Be very businesslike, very cordial, because you'll be dealing with a professional who's probably been in Washington longer than their respective boss. Just tell them you're a concerned citizen, and there's this man, an American citizen overseas named Gonzalo Lira. He has been arrested. He has been charged, and he has been, by his admission, tortured in Ukrainian government custody. And you want your senator to investigate this. Don't make any accusations. That's not what it's about. But you want to talk to a staffer in the office and tell them about this. Spell out his name and say, please look it up yourself on YouTube or Google it. They know how to use Google and they know how to use YouTube like everyone else. And just say, please check this out, and I want to have my senator investigate this. I'm very concerned that one of our citizens overseas is being treated this way by a country we've provided a great deal of aid to. Do not get into whether or not the U.S. siding with Ukraine is right or wrong. That's not what it's about. What you want to do is get a Senate office to make a call to the State Department. Believe me, I've worked the Hill many years ago, but it's not that different. And if the State Department starts getting calls from Senate offices about Gonzalo Lira, they are going to pay attention and they're going to do something about it. Political appointees really do not run this. They have certain procedures in helping Americans overseas. But if everyone hearing my voice calls their senator and asks them to investigate this, it'll have an effect. It's probably the best chance Mr. Lira has. The Biden administration, it's doubtful they'll do anything to help this man. But the State Department has an obligation to. Senators have an obligation to look into these things if their constituents ask for it. Now, you could be asked for your name and address and give it to them. This is perfectly legal and perfectly normal. This morning I was talking and I gave my information out, and I did ask, have the senator send me a response. It'll usually come in the form of a paper letter. That puts it on the record. And they're not going to put anything on a paper that says, we determined that Mr. Lira is worthy of being tortured. They're not going to do anything like that. This is not a hill people are going to die on for their political career, believe me. Zelensky's already being treated with contempt in a lot of corners, and I guarantee you there's a lot of people on Capitol Hill that are not going to be happy about this. The other thing you got to remember is this, and this is something Americans may also have a hard time understanding if they haven't lived overseas for extended periods of time. At almost a DNA level, the United States government does not like seeing its citizens screwed with overseas by anyone. They really don't. If someone has gone off and committed a rape or a murder or something, they're still going to give them a Thanksgiving turkey at Thanksgiving. I'm not joking. When I was living in Japan, the U.S. government would provide Thanksgiving meals for its citizens who were in prison for all sorts of nasty things. But if someone is being illegally detained for free speech, which still is part of our DNA in spite of all the violations we've been seeing, if they're being tortured, if they're being messed with, it's going to not go over well at a real primal level. And it's a good thing. So it doesn't matter. Don't have to say that you agree with Mr. Lira. Myself, I don't agree with a lot of what he has to say. But this is the best way to save him. This is the best way to protect him. Because if an American going overseas making commentary on a political situation as a journalist, and I do consider the man a journalist, no one's safe. And they know this. You don't screw with Americans. That's sort of the way it's supposed to work. Doesn't always work that way, but the reality is that if the heat comes from Washington and it gets to the embassy in Kiev, action will probably be taken. That's basically what you need to do. Now, if you want to call your congressman, you can do that as well, and there's a way to do that if you go to house.gov. But the Senate is what's important, and this is time sensitive. Very time sensitive. I actually think that they just might want to kill him, and because he's been such a pain in the neck to the Zelensky regime from what he's been reporting. Also, do check out his video, Ukraine, a Primer, on YouTube. That is a real important one to have. And if the staffer you're speaking to gives you an email address to send information, send that to him. But remember, be very cordial, be very professional, be very matter of fact. The people that work in Senate offices tend to be extremely professional. I mean, really professional. You'll be impressed if you get to work with them sometime. That's basically it. So please pass this around, tell your friends, and just call up. Do it today, tomorrow for sure. 20 or 30 senators call the State Department over this. It may mean the difference between life or death, Mr. Lira. That's your special report today. Good luck, and let me know in the notes how things went. I'd like to hear that. Good day.